domestic travel restrictions on Florida. Believe it or not, the Biden administration is seriously considering imposing domestic travel restrictions on individuals traveling to and from Florida because the Biden administration wants to crack down on those terrible Floridians that might spread the virus because Florida is a free state. And so Maria Bartiromo, of Fox News, interviewed the governor of Florida, Governor DeSantis, who's a rock star and whose state is indeed the freest state in the country, probably right up there with Texas. And she asks him, how would a travel ban affect Florida? And what does it mean? And why is it happening? And so we have a series of clips on this. And here's the first one. Here it is.
If you look, Maria, right now, you hear this debate over schools. Florida schools have been open the whole school year. We have every parent in Florida has the right to send their child to in-person instruction. Every worker has a right to work and earn a living and put food on their table. And every business has a right to operate. And consequently, our state is doing very well compared to these other states in terms of education and economy. But we also have 26 other states in the District of Columbia that have higher per capita COVID mortality than we do. We have 28 states that have higher per capita cases than we do for the bulk of the pandemic. And if you look right now, states that are always held up by people in Biden's administration, like New York, have way higher per capita patients hospitalized for COVID right now. So there's no basis in medical, there's no basis in economics, there's no basis in reality to do this except to punish a state that is doing it better than what his experts have recommended. Biden is a lockdowner, his advisors are lockdowners. Lockdowns don't work. We've demonstrated that. We're not turning back, Maria, and they will not be able to get away with targeting Florida.
So Florida really has proven that lockdowns don't work because Florida, the free state, their schools have been open since September of last year. And they've had a hybrid school system where you can send your child to school full-time, or if you want, you can send your child to school part-time, and then your child can also learn completely remotely if you want them to. It's really up to you. But Florida is a free state. They're saying, hey, it's up to you. You decide whether you want to go to nightclubs or whether or not you want to go to restaurants or whether or not you want to go to the theater or whether or not you just want to walk outside down the street. And you decide whether you want to wear a mask outside or not. Obviously, Florida strongly encourages the wearing of masks indoors. But I was in Florida, I don't know, a couple of months ago, and I can tell you, people weren't wearing masks in many cases in nightclubs and other places where they were drinking and talking to one another. And they made their own decisions, okay? They made their own decisions. But this domestic travel restriction proposal by the Biden administration is totally about control. And it's about penalizing a really good governor because, let's face it, the Democrats are terrified of a DeSantis candidate for president of the United States because he actually can demonstrate and show how well his state has been run relative to other states. So as a result of not locking down Florida, Maria Bartiromo asks Governor DeSantis, well, how is Florida doing, generally speaking, and economically as a result of not doing the lockdown long term, like, let's say, New York and New Jersey and Connecticut? And we have that clip, and here it is.
We had a 25% increase in home sales year over year, 2019 to 2020. If you look at the top 25 places where new home construction is taking place at the highest levels, a plurality of those are in Florida. I think we have 6 or 7 of the communities. The number one place in the country for new home construction by far is the Villages retirement community, which has thrived during the pandemic, even though, of course, seniors are more vulnerable to COVID than the bulk of the population. So we have a lot of great trends. And I would also say, Maria, you have lockdown states that are putting people out of business. We focused on lifting people up, but by doing that, you actually have new entrepreneurs coming to start new ventures. New restaurants are opening in Florida, new hotels.
So yeah, people are moving to Florida, obviously, but they're not just moving there because they're sick and tired of New York and New Jersey, and as well as the Mid-Atlantic region for that matter. They're also moving there to open up businesses, and they're opening up new hotels and new restaurants. And meanwhile, of course, in Manhattan, restaurants, of course, are for the most part closed or very restricted on their opening. And you see that in many parts of the country, primarily, of course, in blue states. And we've talked about this many times. But the difference is now we have a new administration and their whole modus operandi is let's lock down the really open states and let's demonstrate to people that we can. And this is what's really wrong when you give government too much power and you use a health emergency, of course, health emergency, to basically try to make everybody live their lives exactly the same way. Not everybody has the same risks, obviously. The governor just talked about the villages in Florida, of course, which are populated by, I'm not sure how many tens of thousands of retirees, but my understanding it's a massive complex. And there are thousands and thousands of retirees that flock there and move there permanently. And they haven't even had major outbreaks there. They've managed to contain them, Florida has, because they've used common sense and they have really followed the science. Florida is the #1 state per capita of doses administered of the vaccine as well. Think about that. Florida is the #1 state because it's basically no holds barred, right? You let everybody, including CVS and Walgreens and Walmart, hospitals and doctors, you let everybody provide vaccinations if they want to do so. And it's much easier to get a vaccination in a state like Florida than it is in New York, where it's highly political as to who gets the vaccination. And you have to fill out this long online form, which is highly complicated. And of course, look, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. Why shouldn't New York be #1 given how many people have died in the state of New York? So here's Maria Bartiromo. She's like, well, what about the domestic ban on travel? Why? So we have Governor DeSantis, and here it is.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Governor, we are talking about the potential for a domestic ban on travel. And some people are saying this is a contradiction to what we've been hearing from President Biden because of his open border policy. They are now talking about screening domestic travelers. But the New York Times has reported that illegals are not being screened for COVID at the Texas border. Your reaction to these executive orders?
Of course they're not being screened for COVID at the southern border because this is all political. So he's opening the border. He's letting illegals pour in. They're not doing any COVID tests. They're just coming into the communities. We have no idea what type of COVID or other things that may be carrying, but yet he wants to potentially make you take a test if you just get on an airplane and fly from one American city to the next, or he wants to prevent travel to the state of Florida.
So did you catch that, podcast listeners? So we have President Biden, who has decided to tell ICE and the border agents to allow people who are trying to cross the border, the southern border from Mexico into Texas, as an example, instructing them to not provide COVID tests and instead relocating them in the middle of the country without any COVID tests whatsoever. Right? These are people that aren't American citizens, while at the same time telling the people in the state of Florida who are trying to travel from Florida to the rest of the country or from the rest of the country to Florida, you can't do that. We might do a travel ban on you unless you have a COVID certificate, unless you get tested, unless you can demonstrate you don't have COVID and that you're not, positive, and because you might infect everybody coming out of Florida since it's a free state. I mean, has there ever been an issue more firmly framed than this, right? Of what the President of the United States and his woke staff think of the American people. The American people are bad, especially those living in Florida, but illegal aliens who are trying to cross into the country, who may have any kind of disease imaginable to mankind and aren't tested for any of them, are relocated into the country, and they are the good people. And that is domestic travel restrictions on Florida.